It is Wednesday, 2026. It is April the 13th. It's a little after 7 o'clock. I'm going to do a quick video here and trying to help men, mainly men, because that's my experience, and using my experience and my, over my 50 years of being alive on this planet and my dating life from my late teens to my now 50 years old, and all the trial and tribulations I've gone through, so people can learn from my mistakes and what I've learned, things I've decided to learn because I made mistakes. So and one of the biggest things I learned from doing my research is that there is a dual mating strategy with women, and they have a alpha bang side of their dual mating strategy, and they have a beta male provider side of their dual mating strategy. And at certain times, certain stages, they seek out different men. But at the end of the day, we all seem to fall victim to our, and I wouldn't say victim, but we all seem to naturally follow our our instinctual desires, right? I mean, that you can't beat biology, really, is what I'm trying to say. And the alpha bang side of the dual mating strategy is what women will always want. They'll give their best for that person, right? So you want to be that guy, the guy that's, physically attractive, but as well as has that assertive dominance, the swag, sometimes an intangible, but, just a presence in her life. And for each woman, it's different, Some men might be like, oh, that guy's not alpha. Well, to her, he is, whatever. If she decides he's alpha bang, he's alpha bang. So, but anyway, and so I've been using that, telling men to be that person and to avoid trying to be the beta male provider, because we often were conditioned to be that person, growing up, is work hard, do good, Johnny, be a good man, and be in the civic club, and be in the chambers of commerce, and and get straight A's, and, have perfect attendance, and you'll find a good woman will notice all that, and she'll come looking for you. And, nope. You can kind of believe that a little bit, but, a lot of times you're confronted with reality and like, oh, but she likes this bad boy here to commit crimes. Anyway, So anyway, once you learn the game, has different rules, maybe what we were conditioned to go by, you got to go by those rules, right? Otherwise you'll lose, right? If you didn't know you could double jump in checkers and you never double jumped, when it presented itself, then you're not going to do as well. So anyway, and I've been using criminal cases to kind of suss out the, to kind of help explain why it's important to, be the alpha bang guy and not the beta male provider, right? And the criminal case today that I'd like to discuss is the Rusty Sneiderman case. And his wife was Andrea Sneiderman, and the defendant, or the murder suspect convicted of Rusty Sneiderman's murder, was Hemi Newman. Kind of a weird name. They apparently all were Jewish, which is not that important. But Rusty and Andrea met at Indiana University, apparently. And they were both good students. Rusty was kind of like your all-American guy, he was like, white dude, Jewish guy, about 6'2", strapping, strong, lean, kind of your tall, dark, and handsome. Andrea was Andrea Sneiderman, his wife, was kind of unassuming. I mean, she was okay attractive, but nothing stunning, I would say, but whatever. But anyway, and she was with Rusty, and Rusty was very smart. He ended up getting an MBA from Harvard University. So that's not easy to do after graduating from Indiana. But they went ahead and they're from Atlanta, and I guess on the north side, it was there's a place called Dunwoody, and it's like a nicer place, but that's where they lived. It's a suburb of Atlanta, and it's like, it's like a kind of an affluent suburb of Atlanta, and that's where Andrea and Rusty ended up kind of settling in. So, but they were married. They didn't have like huge incomes, but they had decent jobs. And Rusty, actually in 2008, when the recession hit, Rusty had lost his job. He was a financial planner or whatever, but he had lost his job. I think he got laid off, and I think Andrea had gotten laid off a bit. But what they did what she kind of touted was that they were very good at saving money. She almost kind of, bragged about it a little bit. It's fine. They had like $1 million in the bank saved up between the two of them, and they weren't. And they had two kids, two young kids. At the time Rusty was murdered, they had their kids. I think were like 2, maybe 3 and 5, maybe. I think they had a daughter and a son, Andrea and Rusty. But but they still were able to save, and their house is beautiful. Had a 3-car garage. I mean, I think a 5-bedroom, 2-story. I mean, beautiful house in Dunwoody, Georgia. And but anyway, I mean, a life a lot of people would kind of dream of in a way in America. The suburban life. And this beautiful 3-car garage you see in like a movie. I like the house, but anyway, but at some point, Rusty had to stay at home. He was being kind of the stay-at-home dad, and just because he had lost his job, not because he was just trying to live a new lifestyle. But and Andrea found a job at General Electric, and this is where the paths cross of this whole story. And so Andrea starts working at General Electric, and she's like in charge of like quality control or some crap, and it's, to me, it seemed like, and I say in my other videos, is that one of the most dangerous guys you'll ever meet is a beta male. They're probably the most dangerous people you ever meet, because I think he hired her knowing that he was attracted to her, and that he was in charge. Hemi Newman, was like director of basically over several departments at General Electric. I mean, a big time job. He made up like $180,000 a year, so I mean, he had an important job, so but at the same time, a lot of people that they rise up in these corporations, and even in law enforcement organizations, and a lot of times you see the people who rise to high levels are good beta males, because they know how to shape shift, they know how to be nice guys, they know how to play the political game, they know how to, they like an alpha male guy who, is standing on a square and is disagreeable. You're not going to get along very well in a corporate environment, or even the politics of law enforcement. So a lot of times the people who rise to the highest ranks, they know how to play games. They know how to be the Mr. Nice guy, Mr. Nice girl, right? And they need that status to make themselves feel good, so they work real hard to get that status. So anyway, that's just something I've seen. So that's how I think Hemi kind of got to where he was, right? And you could tell he was Mr. Smarty Pants. He had, kind of that, in his interview, it seemed like he was very crafty with the officers. So, but anyway, so Andrea starts working for him. Well, apparently, part of her job, she had several like General Electric plants that she had to go inspect, because she was like quality control person, I guess. And she had to travel. Well, who had to travel with her? Her boss, apparently. He decided that it was important for him to go with her. And I'll say this, is women are attracted to status. You could be the biggest loser, but if you're her boss, she's attracted to power. Women are naturally attracted to power and status. That doesn't mean that they're being attracted to it and being aroused by it are two separate things. I think men oftentimes get confused with this fact. That's why they'll say money, looks, money, status, and they'll say, those that make a lot of money and those who have status will say, well, money and status is so important. Get that Instagram up, and they don't like to work out or whatever, and they won't focus on looks, right? But looks and behavior is what's gonna really arouse a woman. Money and status, although it may attract a woman, it won't. Once you attract her, it's hard to arouse her. She might like to be around you. She might be drawn to you. You've attracted her, but you haven't aroused her. So, the fact that she can leave you or whatever, or not be, feel an attachment to you, is oftentimes what happens when they're not aroused by you. So that's why, and I think that's kind of what happened in this case, right? But they were going on work trips a lot together, and I think Hemi, because he was a beta male, I say they're dangerous, kill the beta before the beta kills you, and and I think that's what happened with Rusty, is that he became infatuated or obsessed with Andrea. He was having a bad marriage. A lot of times guys that get married are beta males because they see life in scarcity. Oh, got me a girl. I was that. The reason I know is because I was that guy. Oh, got me a girl. She's nice to me. She wants to touch my wiener, and and she makes it seem like she really wants to. And they've tried so many girls, and so many girls have, not done that for them. But what they realize is it's things that they've done, to maybe put girls off, and haven't learned the how to attract women and how to arouse women. I had to learn that. But anyway, and then they become abundant, right? But it's about you. It's a you thing, right? So, but anyway, I think Hemi Newman was very much beta male, very much lived in scarcity, became obsessed with Andrea because, I think she, and here's the thing about women, right? She was very conservative. She was very innocent looking, but women know. I mean, despite, being innocent looking, despite all that, women know how powerful their sexual agency is. As much as they may not want to say it, women know how powerful it can be, especially when flirting with a man, especially when flirting with an undisciplined man, especially, undisciplined with his D, right? A man who's lived in scarcity, a man who is a beta male. I say this before, I say this in other videos. Women can see it. Women can, smell it coming from you big time, especially if you're a huge beta male like Hemi Newman, her boss, right? He's this big time guy, but at GE, but I guarantee she knew he was a beta male punk. I guarantee it. Women know it. They'll act a certain way. And again, they might not 100% know it, but they'll flirt. They'll do little sexual things, and they'll see a reaction from a man. And they're like, oh, got this guy, And I think that was her. Even one of the forensic psychologists that, kind of evaluated Hemi, she said, basically, Andrea was, he was delusional because at some point Hemi claimed, that they were going to get married and the kids were going to be his, and, and Andrea, she didn't have to do much, she would flirt with them, and she would go on these business trips, and they, she would make sure that they were flying, in the same, next to each other. And she had several times, converted their hotel rooms from, staying apart to staying actually together. And, just stuff like that. And for a guy who hasn't been touched in a while, or a guy who doesn't have a, real, lock on his sexuality, as far as, a player type, he gets a lot of sex, so he's not real, controlled by it. I think she could see Hemi coming from a mile away, and she seems innocent, right? She was like a nice schoolgirl, nice Jewish, innocent little girl, and, but, as a man, we, that knows, dude, I mean, women keep their private lives private, which is good. I think they should. But women keep their sexuality private, and they can turn up the heat when no one's looking. And there were actually two people that came. There was a bartender that came, and she was from like South Carolina or something. And she remembered Hemi, and she remembered Andrea, and she remembered them like groping on each other. And Andrea was married to Rusty at this time, and they're groping on each other. They said they kissed, but Andrea denied, through and through, denies an affair the whole time. Now, that could be that image of control, that reputation management, She, her husband was murdered, and she's not going to, give up no one ever found them actually cheating. And rarely will you ever, right? So no one's going to be able to prove whether they were or weren't. Now, Hemi says they did, but I don't think it was a lot if they did. But enough. There was enough there to assume there was some kind of sexuality going on. Now, Andrea, whether she was willing to admit to it or not, and she didn't have to testify in the trial of her husband. Andrea didn't, but she did. And from her testimony, they were able to pretty much I think they filed 16 counts. They actually filed murder on her. And it did look like, she knew. Like, she told a friend of hers that Rusty had been shot, and no one knew at this time that he had been shot. And then she said on the witness stand that she didn't learn until she got to the hospital. But a friend testified, like, she had told her, like, hours earlier that Rusty had been shot. Well, she also deleted phone calls and messages between her and her boss, Hemi, who actually did it. So she was actually charged with like obstruction of justice, and they dropped a murder charge on her because it just was a weak case. But it's kind of like an affair. When you kind of know, right? So, but anyway, yeah. So, but what ends up happening is, Hemi, like I said, he gets so obsessed, and he ends up, a week prior to the actual murder, and Rusty ends up finding him, I think it is him, but he finds a mail on the side of his house early in the morning. He's got his son with him, and his son, I think at this point, is like 3, something like that, 3 or 4, and the guy has like a fake mustache on. He's got a gun in his back pocket, and they got a 911 call that has Rusty chasing him, and he's like, I don't know who this guy is, but he's on the side of my house. And so that was apparently, possibly, a first attempt, where Hemi was actually going to, try to assassinate Rusty at that time, right? But Rusty caught him in the act, and Rusty seemed like a dude. He seemed like a pretty cool dude. He's like, I don't want this guy here, I mean, he was tough. I like the way Rusty sounded. He's like, I don't want this guy by my house, and he ain't no pushover, dude, but at the same time, and I'm not saying Rusty was beta, I'm just saying, how did he not see, Andrea? Was there disrespect? Was there signs that, that she was having an affair? I mean, I don't know, you would, because otherwise, Rusty, he was, so basically that happens, sees this guy on the side of his house, whatever, I would have been on point, at that point, I don't know. But, again, they live in this nice suburb. That could have just been a one-off, some weirdo at the side of my house, and, but that had to have been Hemi. But, so a week later, Rusty's taking his kids to the Dunwoody Prep, school, and it's like your normal, it's their daycare, and it's this, quiet suburb, little strip mall, we all know those, a parking lot, and, people, like early in the morning, people dropping kids off. It's one of the most non-violent times in America, especially around a daycare, it's just, just for my time in law enforcement, 22 years, those are usually areas of, people are pretty on point looking out for, suspicious behavior. That's why crooks know not to go near those places, so they're kind of like, yeah, if you're a weirdo around the school, or as it should, as daycare, you're gonna get reported. So they tend not to idiots tend not to hang out, near those places. So you kind of, those are kind of like safe spaces. But anyway, but yeah, so, early one morning, Rusty's just taking his kids. A week from the earlier incident, I talked about that guy being on the side of his house. And this, silver rented van by Hemi Newman, is pulling into the parking lot. He must have been stalking Rusty. Rusty had dropped off his kids, said, thank you and everything, and walked out to his car. And Hemi Newman, in a pre-bought disguise, had like a mustache or a beard. He had a beard. Got out of a silver Kia, I think it was Sedona minivan, and he shot Hemi up close 4 times. I think it was a burst of 40 caliber, and one of the rounds got him in the neck. It's 40 caliber, but 4 times close range. There was a pediatrician that was also taking his kid to the daycare. Tried to do CPR on Rusty. They tried as hard as they could, but by the time he got to the hospital that day, he was pronounced dead on arrival. So, just a terrible situation. I mean, and one of those things almost Rusty couldn't foresee. I mean, this guy, kind of hunting him, and it's just one of those things. I mean, but again, I think his wife, was more complicit than we think. Now, the prosecution also put, kind of put in the mix that, Andrea didn't really want to be with Hemi. But again, we've seen this before, just like the Wendy Adelson case or the Tracy Grist case. The people that are actually, wanting things to happen, they're manipulating the situation by using other people, by telling other people's stories or whatever. So, and they're saying that's kind of what Andrea did to Hemi, saying that she wanted to get out of her marriage, and, if her husband wasn't around, she'd, marry Hemi and stuff like that. So, they were saying that she was kind of complicit, Now, there's one thing that was said in the thing that, or in the show that is very important, is that if they ask your girl, and I think this is important, if they ask your girl, right, is someone cheating or whatever, right, and they laugh or they say, oh hell no, or whatever, right, that obviously they don't respect your ability to cheat on them, and I think it's shout out Rollo Tomasi. It's not, they don't want you to cheat, but they want you to have the ability to cheat. Women want you to be able to get other women. I mean, they don't want you to get the other women, but they want you to have that ability. They want other women to want you. Now, they don't want you to go after the women. If you are in a relationship, and one of the quickest ways to be dumped in that relationship is to have no other women pay attention to you. Whether you're out and flirting, women will see. Women know more than you if women are checking you out. You want other women checking you out, okay? Because women need the approval of the group to let them know they've got a good man. If no other woman wants you, that means they might not have a good man, because women can never be sure, that they've got the right guy, right? Because you can't, there's no test. But the fact that other women want you, that shows, oh, okay, I've got a good man here, right? So that's why you want to be wanted. And I know people that don't know any better, don't know human evolution and human mating and human reproduction, they might kind of roll their eyes or whatever. But it's all about human mating. It's all about genes. It's all about, fitness, for the survival of her offspring. That's what women are always, that's everything with sexuality. How good is my man? How strong are his genes? That's what she wants to know, right? So anyway, yeah, that's why it's not good to, you can, now if she knows you're kind of a badass, you can self-deprecate a little bit to show, you have some human side, but women want a cocky guy, a guy that knows, hey, I can get other hoes, whatever, but at the same time, you can't self-deprecate too much, or also you can't oh, I've had a lot of girls turn me down, and oh my God, I have had so much bad luck with women, and dude, you might as well you might as well wrap it up, put a bow on it, and say, dump me or whatever, because they will on that, because like I said, they want a winner, and if they's like, oh, if no other girls wanted you, then why would they want you, and that's kind of the case in that, right? So yeah, don't be telling girls like, oh, I have had such a hard time dating these days. Boy, I've been turned down here and there and everywhere, But yeah. So yeah, they I mean, and also, but again, you don't want to put it right in there, you don't want to advertise, you always want to kind of keep it mysterious, and a champion would, he wouldn't give a, I mean, if you're a winner, your results are going to show for you. So anyway, I digress a little bit there, but anyway, so yeah, but what I say that long explanation to say, when they asked Andrea Sneiderman, Rusty's wife, when they asked her, is Rusty cheating on you, or does he have an ex-girlfriend that could, or that maybe her boyfriend did this, right? She's like, oh, she basically laughs, and not to be mean, and he was such a good guy, and so faithful to her. She's like, oh, hell no, absolutely not. She knew, like, no. But that's a bad thing. She was too secure with him. So, she's not scared of losing him. A woman always needs to be scared that if she don't act right, you could be gone, and again, you're not sitting there threatening her. She just knows that, hey, there's a certain amount of behavior, there's a certain behavior, that you need to have. There's a certain standard of behavior, a certain standard of conduct that you have to have around you. And, and you're gonna hold her up to it, right? And if you don't, you have the ability to have other options, right? So that's what that means. It's not like, oh, I'm about to leave you. No, it just means that, it's not that you could cheat. It's not that you could leave. Or that's that we will leave. It's that you could leave, right? But, and that's where a lot of these guys get it wrong, is they want to say, oh, honey, I would never leave you. I mean, I'm together forever, no matter what. No, I mean, it'd be like your job, right? Or anything. Why would you show up on time? If you're, if you knew your job wasn't ever going to fire you, why would you ever show up on time? I mean, you got to know, like, hey, if I don't show up on time, or I take too many days off and don't call in, let my boss know, because we always have those days like, oh man, I don't feel like going in. I need to call my boss, blah, and you don't do that, they'll be like, all right, then you can go ahead and, pack up your things, you're like, oh wait, next time now you got a call, like, damn it, I got a call, because there's gonna be consequences. Well, human beings won't do anything unless, I mean, we look out for our self-interest. It's just part of life, and if we have something to lose, we'll do it, right? So anyway, so that was a key thing I saw in this one, right? Was, that key thing was she laughed when, they asked if Rusty was cheating. She didn't have that fear. They need to have a healthy fear, a healthy anxiety, not like, oh my God, he's gonna leave every day. You can't be doing that. That no one wants to live like that. So, but that's a key. I want to bring that up once more so that it sticks with people, is that, she has to have a healthy fear that, you could walk out whenever you want, and you have other options if you wanted them, and you'll pursue those options, but only if certain conduct's not followed, right? So anyway, but yeah, and then they basically asked her if she knew of anyone that wanted her, and she kind of didn't right away tell her that her boss was, coming on hard to her, and they were holding hands, and they had been seen dancing together, and like I said, she was changing. I mean, she was, personally changing, her seat on flights and stuff like that. They were spending a lot of time traveling together. Now, that's why I say, men, you have to be the champion. You have to be her hero, because if you're not, and you're in a sexless marriage and you're not her hero, I mean, there are always guys in this. I've already said this before on other videos. There are always guys coming at your girl, always. So, just because they're traveling together, you should have, she won't look she won't look at anyone else if she knows that you're her hero, because she won't want to lose you. She knows that she can't find another one of you. So that's why you got to be the hero. That's why you got to be her champion. That's why you got to be her Superman. That's why you got to be her daddy. you know, she had such love for her daddy, you know, and then, you know, she moved out and now you're her daddy, you know. I mean, girls that have that closest with their father, you know, and not in that way, but, you know, that's how much she trusts you. That's how much, you know, she wants you to be number one in her life, you know. So you gotta be that hero guy. And I know women will try to argue that, you know, but, you know, that's just because, you know, they don't want, you know, men to have too much. Those are kind of fearful women that, you know, have, you know, championed the wrong guy, have found Superman in the wrong guy, and he did him wrong. So they're like, you don't need that, you know, anyway. But I guarantee you, if you guys feel like you're the same 50-50 partners, you know, well, you're not going to have as many options as she will. But there's always guys wanting your gal. There's always guys approaching your gal. Always. I mean, you know. But on the flip side, you know, to the ladies, if you find your man hot, other women find your man hot, you know. So, and that's why you always got to be hot. You always got to, you know, look smacked, be in that gym, getting jacked. You know, I do say that. Rusty was that, by the way. But, you know, Hemi was not, and that's why his wife was divorcing him. And, you know, his life was kind of in shambles, the beta male in shambles guy, being the beta male provider to his wife. And, you know, she wasn't respecting that, and he was depressed. And then here comes Andrea, kind of, you know, touching on his wiener, and he, you know, felt all kind of way, you know. But yeah, I mean, that's why I say, you know, watch out for that beta male. He's the most dangerous man you'll ever meet. You know, kill the beta before the beta kills you. You know, Rusty Sneiderman lost his life. He had no idea. I mean, he was just approached, taking his kids to school one day, and, you know, just assassinated, you know, by some beta male that thought he was, you know, going to have a relationship with his wife, you know, which I don't even know how that's going to happen. Like I say, what you fear, well, you attract what you fear. I mean, Hemi Newman, I keep saying Penny. Hemi Newman, you know, wanted Andrea, you know, but by killing Rusty, he assured himself a life in prison. And, you know, now he for sure won't have Andrea, you know. Now, she ended up doing 5 years, you know, on all her stuff. They charged her with, like, perjury and obstruction of justice. So there was something there. You know, they couldn't actually prove that, you know, she, you know, was part of the murder. There was enough there to, you know, just like the Adelson case, you know, she knew about it. She knew something was going to go down. I don't think she was happy with Rusty, but again, that's why I say, and we'll never know, but, you know, that's why you got to know the signs of disrespect. You got to know the signs that you're not loved. You got to know the signs, you know, that you're not respected anymore. You got to know the signs of disinterest from a woman. You know, you just got to, man. Otherwise, you're in danger, you know. I mean, he was ambushed, you know. I mean, just going about his day, he had no idea. You know, even after the attempt on the side of his house, he had no idea. He just living his life, you know. And, you know, that's why, and so, you know, she got hooked up with some beta male. You do kind of got to know who's in your woman's life and how she talks about certain people, you know. I mean, you know, just be aware of self-awareness, situational awareness, you know. It's helpful, you know. But knowing, you know, women that truly respect you, that truly love you, that truly down for you, you know, there's no mistake, you know. And, you know, I've, you know, finally in my 50 years of trying this stuff, you know, I figured it out, you know. I mean, I've had enough good women, you know, they treat you totally different, and life is totally different when you meet those. I mean, there's just no mistaking it. So, but yeah, you know, that's basically it today, you know, is, you know, you want to be the alpha bang. I don't think Rusty was that for Andrea, or maybe he was and he let it fall. I don't know. But, you know, it ended up, you know, he lost his life to a beta male, and his wife seemed to kind of be complicit. So that kind of shows you that, you know, he was not the alpha bang, you know. Otherwise, she would have, you know, she wouldn't have been dancing with the guy. She wouldn't have been getting the same, you know, hotel rooms, and she wouldn't be, you know, sitting next to him on the plane, and, you know, she just wouldn't, you know. So, yeah, I mean, that's why it's so important to be that alpha bang guy. see they treat you so differently. But yeah, I mean, that's all I got there. That's gonna be the case today, and we'll see you on the next one.